Okay, guys, today a very special episode. Founder of Monad and one of the most prolific posters on crypto Twitter, intern and Keone. Yeah, like I said before, we're not going to go too much into like y'all's personal background. We have too much to talk about. So, yeah, just give us like quickly your titles at Monad, and then we can go from there. If you want to go ahead, Keone.
Sure. Great to be here. Keone Han, co-founder and general manager at the Monad Foundation.
And I'm Kevin McCordic, director of growth here at the Monad Foundation.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, this will probably come out like a few days from now, but we're right in the midst of the first ICO on Coinbase, which is a pretty big deal. Is this something that, you know, and again, to the extent that you can talk about this stuff, or you kind of have to be a little bit more nebulous, but is this something that, in your opinion, like regulation and the new environment enabled? Like, you know, 4 years ago, I imagine you would not have considered being able to do something direct to, you know, retail like this. What was it about the environment right now that has kind of like allowed you guys to launch at least, you know, a portion of like the token allocation this way?
I think that the environment is currently definitely more constructive than it was a couple of years ago. But with that said, I think the bigger thing is just the platforms have changed, and there is a growth of new platforms that actually align really well with our objectives and mission of decentralization and broad token ownership. I think that, you know, some of that happens over a longer period of time, but there is an opportunity to achieve broader token ownership. I think back to my favorite cryptocurrency when I first got interested in crypto was Dogecoin. And it's because Dogecoin has a really just like, you know, deep lore and deep lendiness that has come from, you know, many years of people just like spending time together in a community on Reddit and tipping each other. The Dogecoin tip bot was unironically incredibly impactful to like just building distribution. So it's really hard to do that nowadays because people now have a better sense of like the value of memes and the power of memes and the power of community, and like things get priced in. So it's hard to like have a Dogecoin type situation happen exactly. But we have like some very, very rough approximation type things that might achieve, you know, a small fraction of that element of distribution.
Yeah. Okay, Kevin, this is like sort of a question out of left field, but how do you feel like, again, one of the, you're terminally online like myself, or at least it appears, and have like you amongst a few others have been like extremely, I would say, influential in bringing Monad to light for like most of us on crypto Twitter. How do you feel about the vibes right now? Like just directly, how do you feel about, you can say market sentiment or just like the vibes on crypto Twitter? Like we've both been, I don't know exactly how long you've been here, but we've both been here like a long time, and we've seen a lot of different aspects of like the trajectory of this space. Like how do you feel right now, maybe in this moment?
Yeah. Maybe this is where the terminally online side comes out a little bit too much, but I feel like the more time that you spend on crypto Twitter, the more you realize that like people's long-term view is basically just like a 2-day moving average, right? They're like, all right, where were we yesterday? Where are we today? If things are down, then they're like, well, it's going to go down forever. The world is ending. Everything is the worst. And the opposite is also true. So people have very short attention spans. Yeah, I mean, so I think that's like the sentiment, right? If Bitcoin's down and Ethereum's down, like people are just going to be generally unhappy on crypto Twitter. I don't pretend to have any insight on the macro side of things. I think like generally just tech stocks, whatever, like the clearly price drives sentiment in essentially all aspects of like crypto Twitter and generally the terminally online crowd itself. I think that my view is more optimistic. I think consciously when I was little, I was like, it probably makes way more sense to be optimistic. And then I've tried to like reinforce that over time, and now it's become kind of a more natural mindset. So I generally think that crypto is doing extremely well. Like if you told us 2 years ago where crypto would be right now, I think it would beat almost everyone's expectations. So if you zoom out, things look really good overall for like what the tech is going to bring to the world. If you zoom in enough, things look bad. But yeah, I think it's basically just a function of how much people zoom in, and generally people are way too zoomed in.
I think like that seems accurate, and I guess that has been something that it feels like that's been the case for quite some time, for what it's worth. Like we deal with like a lot of day traders effectively, and obviously meme coins with an average holding time of like 15 seconds. Like we're just, rapidly like, running down this cycle. So it seems more extreme. I guess maybe one thing that I've watched now, like through when I first heard about Monad until now, like you guys have spent a lot of time, right? Like it's been a very long kind of arduous process. And I'm curious, and I guess I would throw this question at both you guys, is like, how do you maintain momentum from when you come up with this idea until now? And then also, I mean, to the extent that you, not asking you to, throw others under the bus, but like, how do you convey this idea that like maybe the problems you're working on are take a lot of time, right? And that's something that doesn't necessarily resonate with those of us who are dopamine addicted on Twitter and expect new L2 every other day, right? And like, how do you kind of bridge that gap and explain like, in at least like our proposed solutions, these things are not, overnight. So like, how have you felt like, because I think a lot of the criticism, I wouldn't say necessarily criticism, but like a lot of people have mentioned, Monad has just taken a long time. And in many ways, like for a very complex engineering project, that's normal. For those of us, right, interfacing with this on crypto Twitter is like maybe a little bit jarring. So yeah, whoever wants to take it first, but like something that I've observed, and it's like been quite interesting.
I think that Kevin has some, just from having talked about this many times amongst ourselves, has some good takes on it. My view is the main thing I want to point out first, though, is that we also have to have longevity post mainnet as well. Like, it's not acceptable for us to just get to mainnet and then just like stop working. So at the end of the day, like the team's prior effort to get to this point and all of the hard work to like engineer an entirely new tech stack from scratch and introduce fundamental like new architectures that are needed, I think, like async execution or new BFT consensus mechanism. Like these are things that have been done already, but there are going to be more things like that in the future. And people should want the team to continue to innovate like post mainnet as well. So I just think that mainnet is kind of like a checkpoint in time along a much longer arc, but we're going to have to be here for many years. Like I fully expect to be working on Monad like 5 years from now. And yeah, I just think that although it has taken a long time to get to this point, that just means that the Monad project has been going on for like 3.5 years and will continue to go on for many years beyond that.
Maybe just to add to what Keone said, something I've observed, which has been pretty interesting, is like when it was taking a long time to get to market, it was always kind of this negative, like people would use it if they were trying to like throw shade at Monad. They'd be like, well, I heard about you 2 years and Monad's not live yet, right? And it was kind of looked at as like, oh, this is bad. Or like if I'm trying to hurt Monad, then I bring this up. And that shifted recently, which was interesting to see. And I guess it's easy to explain in hindsight. But I think now it's almost viewed as a positive of like, there are so many things that are basically sandcastles in crypto. And like the second one big wave comes in, it's just dead and gone forever. And I think something that people look at when they're trying to decide if something will be here for the long term is like, well, how long has it been in production or under development? And so I think people look at, well, they're like, I've listened to Keone talk. I understand half of his words, but I gauge that he's very smart. I don't think he would spend, 3.5, 4 years cooking on this thing for it to be short term. And so I think like it's just a feeling of what people see and what they then express. But I do think that like there's kind of this like the embodiment of a long-term mindset is basically like how long it has taken to go to market. And I think it just shows like the long-term mindset of the team and the engineers and everyone who's been like working to bring Monad to market over the years. Yeah, I mean that. Then there's like I think there was two parts to the question. One was like, how do you just make people care for that long about a product that's unlaunched? There's a lot of aspects, but I think it kind of boils down to like making a show out of each milestone. Like I remember getting feedback when we released the docs. Like it was literally just the tech docs. And there was this crazy buildup and the community was going nuts, and investors reach out. They're like, I've never seen anyone care about a docs release ever in my life. And you guys got like 500,000 impressions, like what's going on? Like, why do people care about this? And I think like just making a game out of celebrating the milestones makes it fun for the people that do care. And it also has a secondary effect of like amplifying when things are coming out and progressing and moving forward, which is good. And then I think the other thing that's important is not trying to force it when you are not kind of in the news or the headline, right? Like there's times like during Testnet, pre-Testnet, where like, yeah, we're kind of 3 months past the last major update and we're probably 2 or 3 months ahead of the next one. It's like, if you're just trying to force it's like somebody who just kind of tries to dominate the conversation all the time. You're like, can you just shut up? But if they just have a good comment every once in a while and they're okay being quiet when there's nothing to say, I think that's also key.
Yeah, I think it's funny because a lot of I think for a lot of crypto Twitter, like the assumption is if you're not trying to be the topic of conversation, that something's very wrong. And it's like maybe these people are just working on it. You know what I mean? Like maybe they're just like, it would never be like this in another private company, right? That doesn't, it's quite different in crypto in that sense. So I'm like sympathetic to that notion. And yeah, you even see this with like recent projects that have launched. I mean, not that I necessarily have any insight into what these guys are doing, but there is like this big lead up and then, crypto Twitter is screeching at them. It's like, well, I mean, I don't know necessarily what they're doing, but they may just be doing something, right? And so like that is, it is funny to watch that. And I tend to agree that it's like, well, why haven't we heard from, XYZ team in a certain amount of time? Okay, so like, okay, well, maybe we can get a little bit technical for a second. It may spur to me, nerd sniped questions of mine, but you talk like a lot of what I have read and understood is like these hard engineering problems, right? You talk about asynchronous execution and basically rewriting the EVM from scratch. In your mind, what are the most important? Yeah, I don't know. You don't have to summarize it into like points or anything, but like, what are the most important sort of contributions thus far that you really feel like are novel as a function of working on this for 3.5 years and like Monad specific?
Yeah, I think a couple to mention. The first is Monad BFT itself, which is a frontier consensus mechanism. The second one is an overall architecture that is basically trying to do work optimistically all the time and trying to push the boundary of, okay, I get a packet or I get a block every 400 milliseconds and it's going to take 2 slots to finalize that block, but I have this block here in front of me right now, so I can start optimistically executing it right now. And when I have all these transactions to do, I could run them all serially, but if I run them in parallel optimistically, assuming that they all have correct state inputs, and I produce results of those executions, most of those will end up being correct. And I'll do proper bookkeeping so that I can just keep track of the pending results and commit them serially and detect when I need to go re-execute. I think there's generally this pattern of optimistic execution and sort of trying to be at the tip of the spear or the pushing the envelope of, if there is work that could be done and we have idle resources, then we should use those idle resources to do that work right now. That sort of permeates through the architecture that doesn't exist in other architectures and feels to me to be a very intuitive thing. Like it's how a lot of other computer systems work as well.
Yeah.
It's more complex, but it is more actually just very intuitive.
Okay, so what are the node requirements again? Like I think I've long kind of heard that you can run this on, a a laptop, like a medium grade laptop. So the first question, I do this a lot. I accidentally like bundle questions, so you're gonna have to bear with me. This is probably because these two are like quite related. Okay, so what are the node requirements, and then also was like where did you find in your mind was like the threshold that you didn't want to cross, right? Like so, totally. Talks about data center chain. He seems totally fine with that. It seems like this idea of like a high quality laptop was first of all, it's an easy pitch. It's understandable, but like what in your mind for what you're optimizing for, the level of decentralization you're optimizing for, what were kind of like the requirements in your mind that you wanted for Monad?
Yeah, the hardware requirements are 32 gigs of RAM and a 2 terabyte SSD for storing Monad DB, which is the optimized DB for storing Ethereum Merkle tree state, and then like a reasonable CPU and 100 megabits of bandwidth for full nodes, 300 megabits for validators. It's intended to be a minimal spec that the people could run at home, and it's intended to be a minimal spec so that we would force ourselves to solve the hard problems rather than just kind of falling back on like, oh, well, there'll just be a ton of RAM in every machine, so we won't have to worry about that. I think what that has resulted in is the Monad nodes actually are better at scaling to a really large state, like a larger state than exists right now in Ethereum. Because right now Ethereum is about, I want to say like 250 gigs right now of state. And that's still a level where you could keep all of that in RAM if you needed to. But if we 10x that or we 100x that, then we can't keep all of it in RAM. And yeah, I think something that maybe is underappreciated about the Monad architecture that you might appreciate is that because Monad has sort of like assumed that most state or all state will live on SSD and we'll just have a light cache in RAM, it actually scales to a much larger state, which will result from a much larger level of adoption. Like if you literally have 100 million or 500 million people using Aave depositing, each of those people, like they create state from their deposits. There's no way around that level of growth of state. And it's just a system that can actually scale to a much larger level of adoption.
Have you been surprised? I'm going to think of how to phrase this. Have you been surprised now for the past 3.5, 4 years since this idea came to mind with the trajectory of, hang on, maybe not trajectory, the complacency with moving to increasingly centralized systems? The context here is that I see James, I don't know if he's co-founder. Yeah. One of the, okay. So I see him screeching on Twitter, right? And I say screeching, maybe that's a little bit condescending, but I see him on Twitter talking to people who are pointing out that there's, single sequencer L2s that can do a gajillion TPS, right? And oftentimes his counterpoint is like, this is quite different than, having decentralized nodes around the world that are all coming to consensus at, as fast as possible. Going back 4 years, have you been surprised to see the degree to which there has been a lot of traction with what maybe a lot of us would have thought were much more centralized systems than we originally thought of in crypto? Like, what are your like just overarching thoughts? You don't have to throw anybody under the bus, obviously, but like, what are your views on this?
I think that there are different things going on here. By the way, like one thing that I think is absolutely insane is teams running mainnets with closed source code without audits. Like I think that's an insane standard that the industry should definitely push back on. So that's like sort of the first tier of like crazy things. I think with respect to centralized sequencers, that's just like a different product, depending on the trust assumptions and the robustness of the like DA system and fraud proof system or proof system. Like I think that there's definitely a space for that. So I think that that's like a different topic. But yeah, I think that it's also just a function of, people want to utilize what's here now in production. And that's totally understandable. But if we can offer a better way, if we can push the space forward, then it's just like a different product that is more focused on decentralization and more focused on the core ethos of the space.
It's interesting, I guess, because I'm always interested to see how people interact on this subject specifically, and I really don't necessarily have any like qualms with centralized sequencers. I did say for quite some time that I didn't think these things were going to decentralize. That was one thing. Like I felt very strongly about that, and I said like once you do this, the likelihood of you decentralizing these is extremely low because a decentralized sequencer is just another blockchain. So like that was the one thing that I did. I was like, guys, come on. With that said, though, in production, okay, it's fine. I guess in your mind, and yeah, it's a different product, of course, but like, how do you position yourself against Base, Mega ETH? Like, what is the selling point in your mind for Monad versus something like Base or Mega ETH? Like, how do you bring people on, and what is the like censorship resistance? Only goes so far with at least a decent portion of retail, right? Like probably not what they're optimizing for. Like where do you sell yourself, I guess, specifically on these like all these competing very fast trading centric maybe chains?
I think that yeah, it's a good question. I think for like large businesses, for enterprises, for serious real world efforts, there is a strong preference for decentralized systems. Like there is a fear of, I issue my RWA on this thing, or I start pushing data into this thing, or I deploy this app into this centralized sequencer, and I'm basically giving all the control to a singular counterparty who is located in a singular jurisdiction. Like there are a lot of concerns about the extent to which it really is crypto, and the extent to which all the benefits of decentralization and the benefits of borderless control and control over the system through code by a large distributed validator set are not fulfilled with centralized sequencers. So I think that's really the first thing. And then what you'll see is that has a downstream effect on enterprise adoption and adoption of the systems as mechanisms for payment rails or asset issuance.
Let me take a moment to talk to you about Ellipsis Labs, a team I've known for a while building some of the most interesting products in the space. The Ellipsis team is one of the few that I can consistently point to and say, these guys really know what they're doing. They're backed by Paradigm, Electric Capital, and Han Ventures. The founders, Eugene and Jerry, have experience at Citadel, Jane Street, and the Solana Core team. Since launching their order book DEX, Phoenix, they've done over $80 billion in trading volume by making on-chain order books competitive with centralized exchanges. They are also the team behind Gavel and SolFi. I would consider them the foremost experts in crypto market microstructure. The best part is Ellipsis is hiring for New York-based engineers. Work with a small, focused team who are results-driven, collaborative, and use a modern stack. If you're an engineer who wants to work on infrastructure that's already proving itself in the market, go to ellipsislabs.xyz. Okay, now back to the show.
I hear often people pointing out that Mana has made incredible strides for the EVM, and as a function, as contributing to potentially Ethereum research as well, which is a reasonable argument on the grounds that, yeah, it's like both EVM based. I'm curious, with the work you guys have done, how easily can some of this be implemented in Ethereum eventually versus how much of this is that kind of just like a talking point? I mean, I think you don't have to say this, but I'll say this. Like, I don't think the intention of Monad is to be absorbed by Ethereum at any point in the future. But that doesn't mean that the research can't obviously contribute to, right, like the EVM in general. What are things that you guys have worked on specifically that Ethereum could actually rip out and implement? And then what are things that would take such an overhaul? And maybe I'm just like putting aside like consensus and getting everybody in agreement quickly, like put aside the social aspect and more like the engineering aspect.
I want to expand on that, but I also want to say that I think that decentralization is like, it's really important to have a North Star. It is really important that the project have a purpose. And for us, the North Star is decentralization. If we go down the route of centralization and extreme centralization and are competing on our ability to be as centralized as possible, we just end up with a very different kind of product that makes a lot of trade-offs and decisions, or a lot of outcomes that I think ultimately end up becoming kind of small. So I think one thing that is really important to me personally is not king-making projects, but rather having a credibly neutral stance and allowing all the best builders to compete and demonstrate PMF and grow their businesses, without it just being decided by a central force, like the Monad Foundation, to decide who wins. And that has come into play in the past recently with like different stablecoin issuers competing to be like the designated stablecoin of Hyperliquid or the designated stablecoin of Mega ETH or whatever it is. And I think that there's a short-term optimization there, but I think in the long term, there's like Ethereum has benefited so much from really enforcing credible neutrality to some short-term pain, because the longer-term vision is clear and understood by everyone. And it's clear that the world needs decentralization and needs a truly decentralized system being built by researchers and engineers who are committed to that effort. So I think that, although at times like we might get beat up on crypto Twitter for some particular thing that someone thinks that is not being done as well as like some other centralized actor that can operate in a very centralized way, I think the benefits far outweigh the costs, and I think it'll be manifested over time. But also that's also enabled by the architecture, and it's enabled by all the research and the consensus mechanism improvements and the database, things like that. So I don't know if that answers your previous question a little bit more, but I just think it's important to say, because like it's trivial to fork any project. You can go to GitHub, click the fork button, and then make a couple of lines of changes, add a new precompile for like some sector specific purpose that you think is going to give a good narrative, and launch that thing as a new chain. Like the value is not in the chain processing power itself, it's from the network effects. And the network effects are enabled by high processing power. They're also enabled by like the mission and the vision and all the builders' understanding of that vision and desire to be like a part of that, and the feeling that there's opportunity there to align that. So I think that's really what it comes down to. I'm curious actually to ask you at some point, it doesn't have to be now, but like how you think about the just like why tokens have value and why a token that's attached to like a piece of software has value, because I think it is one of those like really fundamental questions in crypto. But for me, that would be like, the reasons why.
Yeah. No, actually, okay. Well, I was going to, at some point, I was going to ask you that, like, what is the value? Like, or I was going to ask you, how do you think Mon should be valued? Personally, I don't know. I think that there's this, oftentimes people bring up this notion that these should trade like commodities. And I think that that is true in one regard, which is that they are primarily a function of flows, like truly supply and demand. So if there's, and that sounds like the most, obvious point, but this isn't necessarily the case with something like equities, where there are, in theory, like cash flow should provide some lower bound. I don't think we have as firm of an understanding with protocol tokens, for example, what those long run cash flows are, even really what we should be calling cash flows, right? Like how do we compare something like RAV to, like net income or traditional accounting metrics? The one point that you made, and where I think it settles somewhere in the middle, is that it is trivial to fork. A lot of this stuff is open source. The moats are undefinable, maybe indefensible, hard to say, I think, as of right now. There is a difference, though, and why I'm not so keen on this like commodities aspect, which is that, so that the flows aspect is very true. In terms of how commodities function in the real world, I think it is slightly different. I use this analogy like one time, if you like, you have a car, right? And you can go to a gas station and you pay maybe like $3 a gallon, and maybe across the street it's like $2.98, and then maybe on another corner it's like $2.90 that you pay with cash. But like, you're not going to find gas for 30 cents a mile away. and you're not going to find gas for free 5 miles away. There is some lower bound that is a function of like the capex and opex that goes into pulling materials out of the ground in the real world. With crypto, it's a little bit trickier, I think, because like you said, you can just fork this stuff. And so like, what is like the marginal cost of production? It becomes like, I think we converge on something that, there's now chains that are, gaslit. You don't pay any fees to send USDT, right? And so there's not really a perfect parallel where in the real world, gas is like, you're not going to find it far cheaper. On blockchains, you may pay $10 to send $1,000 on Ethereum, or you may pay literally $0 on Plasma or 3 cents on Solana, right? So I don't have like a strong person is like quite long-winded, but I don't have like a strong personal view right now. I think that one interesting potential, value proposition, one, liquidity network effects, there is clearly value there. Like, I think this is very undeniable at this point, right? Like somebody directly forking Solana is not going to have the same value as the Solana token. So there's something there. It's somewhat nebulous. I don't know how to define it, but there's something there. If you can offer a service that does a ton of transactions a second, like these very small increments can add up. So there can be some underlying value there. There can be some lower bound. I don't know. Like, I've thought about this myself probably for much more than I should. What do you think? Like, what? I'll throw it back at you now. We'll skip down to one of the questions I had. Like, how do you view Mon the token? Like, how should it be valued, or do you kind of have like some different ideas? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about the network effects from being the base currency in a network that has a ton of economic activity on it and a ton of users that have all gone through the hoops of creating accounts and putting their data there, transferring assets in, holding assets there, the trust that they have in the network to, just like all of those things. And then all the integrations with exchanges, with asset issuers, with on-ramps and off-ramps, with businesses that accept payments in that form. And then that combined with the economic activity of coming from amazing apps that have their own business models that generate revenue and that have the benefit from being in a composable environment with atomic composability, where they might be plugging into a bunch of other utilities that are all in the same shared global state. It's all of those things, and that creates this network effect that creates, a set of people that want to hold the asset. And also there's a need for people to pay for transactions and pay for inclusion fees, priority fees, potentially MEV tips. All of those are really like things that ultimately have an effect on the token by flowing back to token holders in the form of stakers or in the form of holders when there's fee burn.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that I appreciate you at least having an answer. not to say that like other people don't, but yeah, I think that is at least like a compelling argument to me, right? Like it makes intuitive sense. I will say though that go ahead.
I mean, Ethereum generated $3 billion in transaction fees in 2021. Solana generated over $1 billion in transaction fees in 2024. Like, these are real and very significant numbers that are very highly related to the level of network activity and the demand for transaction inclusion that people have.
Yeah. Do you think that, well, actually, I'll ask you first. Like, do you think that L1s, let's kind of constrain this. Like, do you think that smart contract platform L1s are winner take all?
I think that they're winner take most. I think that naturally there will be a consolidation in the space into a couple of dominant platforms where most of the economic activity is, where users get the best services and that are most effective at onboarding new users. I think that that's natural in any industry, and I intend for Monad to be one of those few.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. it seems like the reason I ask is because it does seem sometimes when we're talking about like how these things should be valued, and well, we've been doing this since inception. It's easier, I think, when you do assume it's winner take all or winner take most. If you think that there's compression to the bottom where like it's forked and it's forked, I say forked, maybe not direct fork, but like if we were to think about Solana in some way as like a fork of Ethereum, and that it was faster and cheaper, but it kind of served the same purpose. But I think if you do think there's a high likelihood that we aggregate around, a single or just a very small number, it's easier to think about like a long-term value proposition. So, well, on that note, I think that another thing that I read quite often, and like one of my friends, Thogard, right? Like he's a huge Monad bull now, and I think he's like quite sharp and seems to have good intentions. And he has kind of pointed out like, the onboarding and integrations on day one and the amount of economic activity on Monad is just going to be like, very, very high quality. And that may not be the case with a lot of chains that have to kind of go through a long, arduous process of onboarding, I don't know, Chainlink and Infura or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like all these different like integrations that we may not think about, but are actually like quite a process to get on board. Like what in your mind, what are the aspects of Monad on day one or, 6 months in the future that has brought like a ton of users on board? Like what are the kind of selling points there in terms of like creating like real economic activity like you're talking about?
I think you're right that there's sort of like a fixed cost of launching a new chain with the right set of integrations. And some of these are expensive, and that's because they have, their own teams of people that are providing 24/7 support, and they have a certain amount of market power. And like that. So I think that in order to deliver a really fully featured, and by featured, I mean like integration related featured, like to have Tenderly and Chainlink and USD Circle and like major wallets and like all these other things is just fundamentally there's a high activation energy. So it is also necessary for the project for it to be worth it for the project to like bring line up all of those integration collaborators. And that worth it means like, there's enough effort that's been put into like building everything up to this point, and there's a number of builders that are going to be there using it, and there's the ecosystem is going to grow, and people have to feel very confident about that in order to make a bet and get over that hump. So I think that, and by the way, it's also more complicated to support or to enable some of these integrations when the chain is really performant, like when there is very high throughput and when there is a custom stack. Like it's much more complicated for Tenderly to support, for example. But it's worth it because this ultimately delivers the least headaches for developers and makes it as easy as possible for developers to be productive so that they can go solve the hard problems that they're trying to solve, which are like, iterating through the idea maze towards PMF. They shouldn't have to worry about like these integration type things. So I think that's another reason why it's like, although maybe there's this perception that there's a ton of chains or there's a ton of forks, and that's kind of like, I don't know what they call this paradox, but like the paradox for whenever you go to the gym, it seems like everyone's really, really jacked because the people that are at the gym more often are working out more. So you get a significant sampling bias by doing that. Like we have the sampling bias that it doesn't take very long to launch a chain and you can just fork things because those are literally like it's faster for those to get produced. So there's like, the factory of like these forks coming out, but it's also hard for them to really have staying power and it's hard for them to get over that activation energy. But on the flip side, like by like building something new from scratch that delivers new performance characteristics with an ecosystem that's very strong and builders that are very ambitious, they're not everything is built on day one. Like what Kuru looks like on day one is going to be different from what it looks like on day 180 or even day 60. But it's like builders who are ambitious and want to like build in a very performant environment and grow their businesses substantially, and they're going to keep iterating. That's really what makes it like worth it to get over that hump as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to expand on the activation energy aspect a little bit. I think something important to point out here as well is that like the activation energy with each year that passes is actually increasing as well, right? Like the table stakes are increasing for launching a new chain. Like for example, if 2020 Solana launched today, it would not have traction, right? And I don't think anyone like Mert would not argue with that, right? Like that just clearly is the case. And I think that like the table stakes, the activation energy now is like a full-fledged ecosystem with basically every app that anyone would expect, and then also some apps that people would not expect. And I think that that's just very difficult. I don't know if it will ever go away, right? And there will be like like some people speculate on that, right? They're like, some people say already, right? The window for L1s is closed, right? The ones we have now are the ones that are going to live forever, and they'll just improve slowly. But I don't know. To me, when I initially heard the pitch for Monad in 2022, one of the things that stood out to me was like the importance of EVM equivalence in the design, because like that is one way that you can actually, I don't know if it lower the activation energy is the right way to describe it in this analogy, but there's so many systems and companies built around the EVM that you can quickly bootstrap an ecosystem and get enough players on board to where you can actually launch a successful eco. And so it's like Solana has been my favorite chain since 2020. I've never been shy about saying that, but like that performance to me is critical. Like you need that for crypto to be important moving forward in the world. And then the EVM equivalence gave Monad a legitimate shot at crossing the chasm, right? At getting the activation energy to launch and for people to care. And I think that is like, I'm not going to say it was 100% right. There's definitely a lot of things that were unexpected. But I think enough people care about that vision to where there is guaranteed going to be an ecosystem, right? There will be users, will be apps. Like people are going to have Monad as the main place that they're transacting. The size of that is certainly up for debate and, remains to be seen. But it's enough to where there is a spark, right? And I think that the quality of builders, the number of apps, the number of users, the ability to get distribution, right? These are all things that will factor into like how, from that spark, how big does the fire grow?
Yeah, I think that's actually something like all this integrations and just complicated onboarding process. That's something that like kind of changed my mind to some extent. I'm not sure where I fall now, but it definitely changed my mind because we were talking about in terms of like the value proposition of a lot of this stuff because like I think I came into crypto with a very first I came into crypto not having any idea what was going on, and then during the bear market I like started to actually look into this stuff and try to understand it, without, which can be a pro and a con, but like without maybe so much of a technical lens. And a lot of my initial reactions when I was digging into this stuff was very much like, whoa, like all of this can be forked in a second. Like there's like zero mode, like zero defensibility. And it wasn't until talking to a lot of people who either have built chains or have built apps explaining like you have to pay a lot of money to get companies to come and like work with you and like rewrite their code. And that like didn't really resonate with me at first because I looked at a lot of this with a very kind of, I don't have a better word, but protocolized lens, like it was all like very much, open source, like, and anybody can just immediately, undercut. And having now spent longer, I do think there is real value there, right? It's all like on a, on a balance sheet or like on an accounting statement, I would probably call it something like an intangible, but it's there, it's real. And it very much like there's something that resonated with me when I was like, oh, I was actually talking to my friend like Doug Colquitt. I don't know if you know him, and he was like, dude, like you don't understand how much like it costs to like just get people to come work with you and work on it. And I was like, yeah, I think that makes a little more sense now. So I've shifted my mindset because I was like, guys, like this is it's all in the computer, right? It's just code. Like why are we like it shouldn't be valued this much? And then over time, right, I have like had some varying opinions, and I don't know where I fall now, but
I would say also that all of this is to give the ecosystem a fighting chance to really grow. And
Yeah,
if it can grow, and if it can grow quickly, it can grow into something really massive. Like the growth of Solana and the Solana economy over the past couple of years has been honestly pretty breathtaking to see. Is proof that when there is PMF, when there is performance, when there is a unique thing that's bringing people in, then there can be incredible growth. And that's really what justifies sort of like investor investment into this
yeah,
space at the earliest stage. But it's not, it's necessary, but not sufficient. And I guess all I would say is that there's like a lot of these prerequisites that need to be in place in order to give builders a fighting chance and the ecosystem a fighting chance. But we don't assume success just from having like integrations or just from being EVM compatible or just from being performant. Like these are just the starting points.
yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the airdrop, the cards. Like, what was you Kevin, you kind of alluded to this before, like creating, little milestones around a lot of things and gamifying or making it fun or creating some talk. And honestly, from what I could tell, glancing at crypto Twitter, like almost everybody was sharing this. So to the extent that crypto Twitter has any, value at this point, like there was a lot of traction there. What was the rationale behind, maybe the airdrop and then just like the community building thus far? I got, I was checking my little cards every day, my little boxes. So it was fun, right? What was the rationale behind this? And then maybe anything else with regards to this kind of community building aspect?
Yeah, maybe to just hit on like cards and boxes, and some of the thought process behind it. So first got to shout out the brain behind the design, Cryptunes. I got to give him some love and then also throw the chirp in there. But I said Tunes has more good ideas than anybody, but it's because he has 10 times more ideas than anybody, constantly iterating. But yeah, on the design, some of the thought process behind it. One kind of insight is that like this is a major thing people are going to care about. And generally attention, whether it's good or bad, right? Hopefully it's good, but just attention, the absolute value of the attention you capture is good for the protocol, right? The worst place to be if you're trying to launch an L1 is that nobody even knows you exist, right? Irrelevance is the reason 99% of crypto projects die. It's not because they have haters. It's because they have nobody that cares at all. And so attention capture. Yeah, they have. If you have no haters, then you are probably dead upon arrival. Yeah, I would say so. If you assume that like attention is a scarce asset, maybe the scarce asset that's important to capture for an ecosystem to grow in the future, having something people are going to care about, in this case the airdrop, and pairing it with a way to capture attention is good, right? So that's kind of the fundamental logic flow or thought process. The cards, I think, was it also the cards came out of a place of knowing that the Monad community had like grown very strong and people knew it, but it was hard to break into. And like we're not, we're completely aware of that. If there's a group of people who've been really good friends in Telegram chats and in Discords for a year and a half, like it doesn't matter if you show up, and you try for a month, you're just not going to be as close with them. And, Monad, kind of the ethos of Monad, right, is decentralized, permissionless, open source. We want everyone to feel like it is open and accessible. And so Monad cards was almost like an ode to crypto Twitter, right? I think we use the line, it's a token of appreciation. CT is the heartbeat and the brain that like keeps the industry moving forward. There's like, people may say it's more of a toxic pit these days, but it's like all of the things that are important are discussed on crypto Twitter, and that like is very clearly why crypto has had a lot of success in the past. So if you're trying to launch an ecosystem that is open and available to everyone, you want to make sure crypto Twitter at least knows about it. But it would be great if they could even care about it or even like it. And so the personalized aspect of the cards which our design team crushed, I think like went a long way. Like people saw that they had they made the list, right? There was, initially like 5,000 people that were hand selected. So someone affirming that you're in the top 5,000, like that makes you feel special out of the gate. Having a personalized design for the card itself, like felt cool, right? Somebody made this caricature of your PFP for you. And then also kind of the hint or like, I don't know, showing that at some point in the future, like a Monad card could be something that like you could hang your hat on and like feel a part of the Monad ecosystem. So tying all those things together, I think was when people initially started posting them, like it made them feel special. Boxes came from a very similar place. You could either have people log in and just see a number or creating a shareable experience. Clearly that's something that works well, right? I discount Kaido and the Mindshare board a lot. But when the leaderboard's showing something that you're doing well at, you're like, oh, well, let's point to this. So I think like on that aspect, like it just was a decent proxy for the amount of people talking about Monad. So like giving kind of this spectacle, capturing attention, it's kind of just like a free supplemental way to call attention to Monad.
I saw this thing called Monad Momentum. What is this? It seems like a big push maybe at launch. So I don't have too much context. I tried to read, but I didn't. I couldn't really glean exactly what was going on. So yeah, I guess this is just like all gearing up for public launch, but then like as you were saying, continuing to onboard and create momentum post launch. So I assume this is an aspect of that. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's a grant program from the Monad Foundation that is different from other grant programs in the past in the sense that it's really focused on teams' ability to acquire users and identify the most effective user acquisition or UA channels to measure their cost of acquiring a user and to optimize that, to measure the long-term value of one user, to measure their retention rates. And it's really a program that's oriented around challenging builders to optimize their UA funnels and iteratively improve those over time. So we basically ask builders, how much does it cost you to acquire one user? How are you determining that is a unique new user? Is that really the cheapest? Okay, you can acquire a user for $10 per user. Okay, here's like $1,000 to try to go acquire 100 users. Now try that and see how it goes. And maybe some of your assumptions were wrong. We'll recalibrate. But it's really oriented around this idea of UA being the thing that should be focused on rather than sort of the vanity metrics of TVL or volume, which I know are how a lot of projects get compared nowadays because it's like the lowest common denominator way to compare apples to oranges. But fundamentally, we don't believe is actually the key to sustainable ecosystem growth or the key to success for any project. Therefore, we should focus more on things that do actually move the needle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I want to finish up with mainnet coming soon. I don't think you guys have announced a date yet, but obviously seems like
we have actually.
Oh, you have? Oh, sorry, my bad. What is the date?
The date is Monday, November 24th.
Monday. Okay, so exactly a week. Well, the day after this comes out, in fact. So that's perfect timing. Okay.
Oh, great. Okay, it's tomorrow. Nice.
Yeah,
The mainnet is tomorrow, Court.
Yeah, there we go. So on that note, tell me what, like, tomorrow, now this is Sunday, tomorrow I'm logging in, wake up, ready to get online, going to try Monad. Pitch me on some apps. Like what should people be using? I played around with the testnet, I think a few months ago, but sell me on a few apps, both you guys, that you would recommend people checking out to get a feel for the chain as a whole.
There will be, an ecosystem directory of a bunch of different apps that you can go and check out. There's an explore page. I believe there's a specific highlight for Monad Momentum apps. So for my friends who, maybe are crypto adjacent, aren't like super deep in the weeds, but like want to check a few things out, I tell them to go check out the Monad Momentum apps, just because it's an easy place to start. there's a smaller number of apps to go and look at. I think Kuru is in all of those. They're the easy one to shout out, but they've been around building the Monad ecosystem for a very long time. Have done an awesome job capturing attention. I'm sure people will be swapping on them on day one.
I want to very briefly mention a larger number of apps. I mean, at the end of the day, this is just a starting point, and I'm sure the ecosystem will continue to grow over time. And even, apps that I don't, or teams that I don't mention right now, will probably be like the biggest teams in the Monad ecosystem. Like when I think about Solana on day one versus, years later, Pumped Up Fund got started, or Jupiter was not the dominant like trading venue aggregator on day. I guess there was no aggregator, but there is, because the ecosystem is a level playing field and anyone may compete. I do expect that things will change a lot over time. But it is quite exciting to see the launch of many applications such as Rarebet Sports, which is building daily fantasy sports and like wager based, or I forgot, I'm so bad at this, like the thing where you chain multiple wagers together. God damn it. Okay. Yeah. So you should check out Rarebet Sports and put your parlays in. Bluffle is a really great positive habit based consumer game. Lumaterra is building a really fun MMORPG that combines yield farming with character development. I'm excited for Sappy Seals to launch their Omnia game on Monad. I'm excited for Kizzy to launch social media betting on Monad. It's a very novel concept, and the team has really persevered in bringing this concept to market and doing so in a very compliant way. Mu Digital is bringing Asian RWAs on chain, delivering higher yield for users. Town Square is bringing composable cross-chain lending to Monad. Euler is deploying on Monad. It's a cross-chain lending protocol, but or a multi-chain lending protocol. But it's really been amazing to see their bounce back from the hack a couple of years ago and the incredible TVL growth. We're really excited for them to be there. LFJ is launching their token mill product on Monad. It's oriented around meme coin launch pad platform, but also like finding ways to distribute meme coins very equitably and identifying like meme coin winners. LootGo is a move to earn app that also enables meme coin distribution. You can earn meme coin rewards for staying active. Nad.fun is a really just like very well designed launch pad built by a community member who's just very dedicated to the growth of this. Breath of Estova is an MMORPG that has built out a world that's actually very Monad, like has a lot of traces of Monad in it as well. So I could go. I don't want to ramble, but
I didn't want to.
Just think that there's. You didn't want to
make
off,
you
sorry.
like. I realized like right when I asked that I have like the founder on here, and you have to be like quite diplomatic with names you mentioned. So I didn't want to put you in a spot where you felt like you had to read down a list. But that was fantastic, and that's good because you named a lot, which means people have plenty of stuff to check out. So, guys, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. It's quite exciting that this will be the day before the launch. So, good luck. I will be paying attention. Hopefully, in 6 months or a year, we can have you back on, talk about how it's going, lessons learned. So thank you guys. Fantastic. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.